Okay, but why does a world that looks like this
Going online! Tons of freebies are up for grabs!
You don't have fun at our guest expense! Bernice! Put away the flamethrower, now!
have a world and story that's all about this?
Weren't they also your stepping stones? Your heroes?
Trigger! Pull yourself together!
Kiddos, please forgive your old man. From now on, you're on your own. Sorry. I've always been so selfish.
When Zenless Zone Zero was announced, got its first trailers, and released, I never expected it to be so filled with downright harrowing and tragic stories that really tugged on the heartstrings. For a game that at first glance looks very colorful and cheery, it was a really good shakeup and has quickly made Zenless's dark and gritty worlds one of my favorites. But I feel like that side of Zenless is still a bit overshadowed by everything else that's going on in the main story or events. We gloss over so many horrific details about this apocalyptic world because for all the characters we follow, it's just business as usual. So today I wanted to take a look at the dark and gritty world of Zenless Zone Zero, focusing on the Hollows, the fall of the old capital, and two different kinds of survivors, and how they dealt with the tragedy that befell humanity.
An all-devouring disaster with chaotic space, monsters, and etheric matter.
The Hollows. They are one of the places we arguably spend the most time in while playing Zenless, to fight enemies, gather resources, or to explore the many stories the game has to tell. But have you ever stopped and thought about how horrific the idea of them is? In-game they are described as apocalyptic level disasters. Hollows are essentially paranormal pocket dimensions that shake up the space-time environment inside of it, causing everything inside them to go haywire. Buildings will change layout and placement, the ground will change shape, and your sense of time will be destroyed in the mere hours of being inside of one. Because of this, Hollows are almost impossible to map out and properly explore. This is why people get trapped inside of them without either a bamboo with a carrot or a proxy. The way you came in is certainly not the way you came out, and even the idea of a way is unheard of inside of an unstable hollow. To add to the horror of a messed up space-time environment is the fact that hollows generally pop up out of nowhere. The only signs are small and easy to miss things like vibrations in the ground, electric malfunctions, and objects moving without any inputs. One moment you can be cooking in your kitchen and the next moment you'll be swallowed up by a hollow, where even your own kitchen isn't what it used to be. And then you have to contend with the new dangers that the Hollows birthed into the world. Ether corruption and the dreaded ethereals. The Hollows seemingly use the substance ether to change the environment and creatures within, as the air inside of a hollow is dense with this stuff. While buildings and non-living objects affected by ether warp and degrade because of it, with large black ether crystals forming on them, humans and animals who are exposed to ether for an extended period of time get corrupted by it in ways that can only be described as a fate worse than death. Ether corruption causes those same black crystals to painfully form on your body, slowly but surely covering you in it and forming a so-called core at either the head or torso, while your sanity also degrades rapidly. In the end, you are turned into an ethereal. These ether-based monsters roam the hollows and attack anyone who dares enter them. They often take the shape of humanoids, animals, or even objects that have come to life. When you think about it, a lot of ethereals were once human. If stuck in a newly formed hollow, you have to contend with the idea that your friends and family could have been violently transformed into them and are now actively hunting you down. So yeah, the hollows are apocalyptic, alright. There's seemingly no way to stop them, and they corrupt and take over anything and anyone they encounter. As expected, the vast majority of civilizations did not survive this apocalypse. We can safely assume that most of the world is now covered in hollows, and the ruins of those who died from them. The city of Eridu was able to survive despite the Hollow, however, as the city managed to use ether as an energy source, create anti-corruption armor, and so was able to exploit the Hollow for their own survival. The city of Eridu was set out to ride out the apocalypse, but of course nothing is ever that easy.
With this system in place, New Eridu has any hollows within its borders under complete control.
Complete control? The audacity.
11 years ago, Eridu, the last surviving civilization on Earth, fell. Not much is known about what exactly happened that day, as the mystery of uncovering who or what caused it is still Bell and Wise's main drive in the main story, but there are enough bits and pieces from events and character stories to piece together how the apocalypse came back to Eridu with a vengeance. Hollow Zero, the name given to the oldest hollow the people of Eridu found, suddenly started expanding rapidly and with no apparent way to stop it. Before long, it reached the city of Eridu and started swallowing it up before everyone could be evacuated. Entire city blocks disappeared in minutes, with the still running citizens being taken by the Hollow alongside it. While the government and defense force were trying to save what could be saved, everyone knew this was likely the end of civilization. One can only imagine the scale of the horror that day. The swallowed up parts of the city being taken over by ether corruption, ethereals hunting down citizens who are now trapped in the Hollow, public security and the defense force trying desperately to help and buy time for those who can still run from the end, often fighting to the bitter end. All the while, those at a still safe distance could see the apocalypse slowly approaching. The government of Eridu played a very desperate gamble in order to stop the Hollow from expanding. All around the city's more industrial areas, Shiyu pillars were built in order to store ether gathered from the Hollow. It's essentially a battery the size of a skyscraper, in order to quite literally starve Hollow Zero from getting more matter to consume. 14 of these pillars were detonated in Hollow Zero's path, from the southwest to the northeast of Eridu. Everything in the surrounding area was destroyed, creating the chasm and separating what remains from Eridu from Hollow Zero. Those that were left behind were basically doomed. There was no way back out to the safety of civilization. They mostly either died in the Hollows, lost and hunted in a realm that people would never be able to comprehend, or were forced to try and survive in the ruins of Eridu, cut off from their friends, family and their government. But it worked. The detonation of the Shiyu pillars successfully halted the spread of Hollow Zero. It now stays dormant on the other side of the chasm. The survivors proceed to create the city of New Eridu on the safe side of the chasm, safely out of reach of Hollow Zero, where now life is back to what it once was, all things considered. Explorers strike into the Hollows once again to collect ether. People live their lives and the last civilization on Earth is able to breathe again. But the cost was also heavy. Basically, the entire defense force of Eridu was wiped out except for the Obsidian Division. Countless people died from the Hollow's corruption, ethereals, the detonation of the Shiyu pillars and the aftermath of this apocalypse. But humanity lived, for now, with countless survivors forever bearing the scars from 11 years ago. Most notably the children of Eridu and those soldiers from the Obsidian Division who lived to fight another day. So for the next section, expect some light spoilers.
Mommy will always be with you.
We know that quite a few of our playable characters were actually children present during the fall of the old capital, who had to suffer through the apocalyptic event and somehow land their feet again in New Eridu. I think Astra Yao's story is probably the most well known due to her amazing trailer. She was still missing 24 hours after the disaster, but was eventually found between the border of Vulcan and Janus quarters by a team from the Hollow Investigation Association, whose captain managed to calm her down using a song. But as they were getting ready for extraction, ethereals were closing in and the team decided to essentially sacrifice themselves for Astra so that she could escape and survive. where she was eventually picked up and sent to a makeshift shelter, presumably still inside the hollow. It was here where Astra Yao first heard the music of Joran de Winter and decided to become the songstress of this new era, post-apocalypse. Void Hunter Hoshimi Miyabi is another character whose childhood was completely shaken up by Hollow Zero's expansion, as she was living a rather peaceful life in the Hoshimi estate, being cared for by her family and her mother before the disaster. Learning skills like horseback riding, archery, and calligraphy, with her mother knowing full well that Miyabi was essentially destined to become a warrior. During the fall of the old capital, that came to be, but not in the way anyone expected, as Hollow Zero swallowed up the Hoshimi estate and destroyed most of it, corrupting countless family members who weren't slain by ethereals, including Miyabi's mother, who essentially asked Miyabi to mercy kill her with the sword Tailless, causing the first time the powerful sword took a hold of her. Years later, she would take up the sword again to protect the citizens of New Eridu against the ethereals that took so much from her. A recent addition to the cast is the artillerist of Obel Squad, Seed, who also suffered greatly from the disaster as a young child. Being from the Helios Academy and gifted with the ability to control machines, it is unknown how she survived and what she did for the whole half a month she was stuck inside Hollow Zero, without any signs of ether corruption. But she would eventually be found and rescued by the intelligent construct named Seed, who would care for her as she rose up to join New Eridu's Defense Force Obel Squad. Not really out of a sense of duty, but because that's where family is. Lastly, two other children from the Helios Academy survived through the horrors of the apocalypse and found a new purpose in its wake, Bell and Wise. The students of Corolla Arna, who is rumored to have caused the disaster of Hollow Zero, were saved by their teacher and fled the encroaching horror with their Bangbu EOS and the HDD in tow. Now they use their powers as proxies and hide under the guise of video store managers and Yunquei Summit disciples, all to work tirelessly to find out the truth about what really happened 11 years ago. Their purpose is intrinsically linked to their traumatic past, as their teacher could either be framed or be truly responsible for the deaths of untold thousands.
No one talks about the soldiers who gave their lives in Hollow Zero.
The defense force of the city of Eridu played a crucial part during the fall of the old capital, holding back the unstoppable tides of ethereals as the remaining citizens tried their best to escape the ever-growing hollow. Countless died, but many also survived the ordeal, often staying with the newly dubbed New Eridu Defense Force. But the scars stayed and for some festered into something much worse. One of the most impactful stories about the survivors of the Defense Force is actually found in Trigger's agent story, Out of Sight, which focuses on Trigger and Zoe, two sides of the same coin. They were both snipers tasked with supporting their squad during the fall of the old capital, as they fought through the hordes of ethereals during the seemingly end of days. Zoe was part of Nemesis Squad, who were tasked with holding the front lines against a wave of monsters. They were promised reinforcements by command, but it never came and Zoe was forced to retreat as all her squad mates died fighting. Later on, she came across Liar Squad, whose own sniper, Trigger, was wounded and blinded due to an etheric shot to her eyes. As Liar Squad held the line, they begged Zoe to take Trigger with her and run for it. Both snipers survived the fall of Eridu, but suffered heavily from PTSD after everything that happened, which is completely understandable. But the way they both dealt with the loss couldn't be completely different. Zoe, who seemingly didn't get the support she needed from the government, suffered so badly from her trauma that she was unable to hold normal conversations or sleep properly, as she kept seeing the images of her squad's death. Eventually, she snapped, thinking her squad mates were haunting her to tell her to get revenge against those who abandoned them, those who promised reinforcements but didn't deliver, Thus, she began a string of murders of current and former Defense Force soldiers, eventually setting her sights on Trigger, the sniper she saved all those years ago, using the proxy Phaethon to find her under a fake mission, while also kidnapping multiple other veterans and mentally torturing Trigger. During this game of cat and mouse, Zoe delivered a speech during the Remembrance Day ceremony in Scott Outpost, where Trigger and the proxy were also present.
My speech was meant to end here, but since you all seem quite engaged, please allow me to share a little more. The reason you all agree with what I've said is because it offers a way to step away from the pain. That's what the living do. They seek ways to ease the weight of others' deaths so they can find a way to start over. This is the new Eridu of today. A huge disaster consumed the old capital, and the people who survived it keep saying things like, treasure the moment and start fresh to numb themselves, hoping to forget the nightmare. No one talks about the soldiers who gave their lives in Hollow Zero. No one asks why they had to die. The brave gave their lives battling the ethereal onslaught, while the weak survived. This is a new Eridu, built by weaklings. Its order founded upon their way of thinking. Your applause makes me realize you all accept this logic. Each of you had loved ones who sacrificed their lives in the fall of the old capital. And now, you're thankful that someone has encouraged you to move on from them. What meaning does the sacrifice of those who died have if you all choose to forget? Have you never thought about why your own loved ones had to die? And why no one is responsible for their deaths?
Miss Zoe, there's not much time left for your,
Open your eyes! I'm speaking to those who have lost loved ones! If death is the medal for the fallen, then pain is the cross the living must bear. If you fear its weight and run from the suffering, the soldiers will never find peace in their eternal rest. To tear the wound open once again, so you'll never forget the searing pain! That's the real meaning of Remembrance Day!
In the end, the two snipers fought each other in a hollow, ending in Trigger avenging all those innocent people her former comrade murdered. This experience caused Trigger to re-enter the Defense Force, this time with a new purpose: finding out what exactly happened during the fall of the old capital. The way both Zoe and Trigger suffered the same trauma and PTSD, but went about it at a completely different way, is what makes their story so strong in my opinion. But it also begs the question, how well did the new Eridu government actually take care of their veterans? As you can argue that it was their lack of support that caused Zoe to spiral into a murderer. A more recent addition to the world of Zenless is Colonel Isolde, who plays an important role in the past few main stories. So for the sake of spoilers, please skip to the conclusion if you don't want to get spoiled. Isolde was the captain of Agamemnon's squad during the fall of the old capital, fighting near Waifei Peninsula against the unstoppable hordes of ethereals. The squad was tasked with defending a train which, so they were told, was carrying civilians. This caused the entire squad to fight to the bitter end against the etheric horde, with many of its members dying before the High Preceptor of Yunque's summit came to the rescue. After the fall, Isolde began to question the orders her squad was given, as something seemed to be fishy, and began investigating the case herself. Eventually, she came into contact with the company Porcelumex and even the Exaltists, as she began to play all sides to uncover the truth. And eventually, she found the truth. One of the co-CEOs of Porcelumex had bribed her commanding officer Lorenz into redeploying his forces, including Isolde's squad, taking them from protecting civilians to protecting trains carrying Porcelume stockpiles, which means that her entire squad died for so-called valuable assets, not civilians as they believed. This break of trust caused Isolde to spiral, having already lost any trust in the authorities of New Eridu, as she fully embraced the cause of the Exaltists in order to enact her revenge, carefully stringing up the happenings in Waifei Peninsula to get both the Port Salumex CEO Lucro and the now Major Lorenz killed, which she succeeded in.
Your heroes? Magus, the promise you couldn't bring yourself to keep, I kept it for you.
But by now, the gamble was up, and Obel's squad was on her heels. A climactic battle followed, which ended in her death at the hands of Obel's squad and the proxy. Isolde was betrayed by corporate greed and the corruption of her superiors, causing her to forsake her duty for revenge. Arguably, her reasons are justifiable, but she just went too far in trying to get justice for what happened. The last soldier I wanted to look at is Captain Magus of Obel's squad. While her story is rather short, the implications are kind of disturbing, and I feel like we don't talk about it often enough. Magus, who used to be called Orpheus, was a soldier in Eridu's defense force during the fall of the old capital, and she was actually part of Captain Isolde's Agamemnon squad and a friend of hers. As we know, their squad was decimated during the battle against Ethereals, with Orpheus herself being gravely injured but rescued from the battle. However, Orpheus eventually died due to her injuries, but the military was not done with her. What remained of Orpheus's consciousness was essentially pulled from her brain and uploaded into a special gun-type intelligent construct, who donned her codename Magus and went on to lead Obel's squad. Meanwhile, her body was salvaged and used in the military's cloning experiment, which eventually created a basically perfect clone of Orpheus, who we of course know as Orphe Magnuson. Orphe now serves as Magus's gunner, a physical body made to aid Magus and nothing more. So when you look at it, Magus and Orphe are just a bundle of existential crises. Like, Magus literally got turned into a gun. She was taken from death and turned into a gun. Meanwhile, Orphe lives knowing she was born to be nothing more than a body to be used by the defense force, which often causes her to question her purpose in life as an individual. And I think that without the rest of Obel's squad, the both of them would have broken a long time ago. Looking at the different children and soldiers we talked about, the most interesting thing is how different everyone dealt with the same traumatic and apocalyptic event. While people like Zoe and Isolde broke and chose the paths of violence and revenge, albeit for pretty justifiable reasons, meanwhile others like Astra Yao and Trigger instead chose to find a new purpose in life, focusing on helping others and themselves heal from what was quite possibly the end of the world. These personal stories add to the horror and darkness that the Hollows personify, in my opinion. These pocket dimensions that ruin anything and everything inside of them. The reason so many people died and keep dying is because the Hollows are a sheer paranormal evil that we cannot seem to overcome. Even aside from the Hollows, the world of Zenless Zone Zero is filled with many more dark and grim themes like existential threat between Orphe and Magus, and the constant background of corporate greed and political games that seem to be everywhere in the main story. These are just some of the many examples of the dark and horrific world of Zenless Zone Zero. I think it's quite possibly the most mature and gritty setting in a Hoyo game, all while at first glance looking like the complete opposite. But what do you think about the dark aspects of Zenless Zone Zero's lore, and whose story tugged on your heartstrings the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing as I post regular deep dives and reviews into the games that I love.
Woohoo! Amazing, flawless camera work, such smooth editing. Nicole, Ambi, what did you think? Didn't I shoot it just like the Starlight Night series?